Welcome to Splat B Barbering Education. I'm Barry and today's video is all about graduation and tapers. This is my model Lewis, and before we get started I'm going to be checking through Lewis's hair. What I'm looking for is what the texture of the hair is doing. I'm looking at what the movement of the hair is doing, how long is the hair, and how much do we need to take off to kind of get the result that we're looking for. I'm looking at his hair type, I'm looking at the hair thickness, all of the influencing factors that's going to help me decide what I need to do to deliver a great haircut. I'm also going to be deciding what tools I need to be using to achieve that look. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a mixture of different tools. We're going to be working with scissors, I'm going to be working with the razor, I'm also going to be working with clippers and trimmers. So let's get started. So as you can see, I'm just wetting the hair down with water, preparing it, making sure the hair's of an even moisture from roots to ends. That's going to be important because when I go to start cutting Lewis's hair, I want the tension of each of my sections to be even, and I'm going to achieve that by making sure the hair is evenly moist. Graduation is the build-up of weight and length on the top of the haircut. We're moving from a short perimeter length on the hairline, and we build up length and weight as we start to work up the head. That's generally what graduation is. We're creating structure. So to begin my graduation, I'm going to be starting at the temple on the side panel of the head, and I'm going to be taking diagonal back sections. Taking diagonal back sections allows me to control how much hair I take off for my graduation, but it also allows me to get my fingers closer to the head. I'm in more control of what I'm actually doing. Making sure that I'm pulling the hair straight off the head towards the centre of my body. I'm not using any over direction at this point, and I'm also not using any elevation. That's because I want the graduation to be consistent throughout the side panel of the head. Notice after each section I cut, I'm combing it into position. I'm moving the hair about the head. That's because I'm assessing what I've done. I'm assessing, is it right? Does it look good? Could it be better? Do I need to change the tool? Do I need to add more softness? Always asking yourself these questions to make sure you're going to deliver the best possible haircut. It's an art form, it's fun, it's creative, so make it a creative process. That's very, very important. For me, it's very important. If I'm doing haircuts and I'm not getting that satisfaction of being creative, I get bored really, really quickly. So it's very, very artistic for me, very, very creative. we're still working with diagonal back sections when we get onto the back of the head, but we're over directing it across to behind the ear. That allows me to maintain the length in the crown area above the occipital bone. And even though we're over directing across to behind the ear, we're still working with the same cutting angle as we've done throughout the whole side panel. Moving on to the left hand side of the haircut, we need to make sure, and this is obvious, that the left hand side is the same length as the right hand side. Simple and obvious, but how would you do that? We simply do that by taking our comb and taking a small section on the previously cut side and using the teeth of the comb to measure the length of the hair that's on the head still. That gives us an indication where or how much hair we need to take off on the opposite side, on the left hand side. So we measure, we count down how many teeth, that gives us our measurement. We take that same small section on the left hand side, measure, and the hair that's longer than our measurement we simply cut off. That gives us our guideline, so we can then start to work on our diagonal back sections on the left hand side. Once we've got our guideline, we can then start to work our diagonal back sections and start to work our graduation on the left hand side. Now it's important to notice the hand position has changed. We went from working on the right hand side with our fingers pointing up and our fingertips moving away from the head, giving our graduation. Notice when we move on to the left, our fingertips are now pointing down and it's our knuckles that move away from the head, giving us our graduation. Now moving on to the back of the head. Half the back of the head in two sections, left side and right side. Take our section running along the occipital bone from the centre back out to the ear, and then doing the same on the opposite side from the centre back along the occipital bone to behind the ear. This separates our nape area underneath the occipital bone and our crown area above the occipital bone. This is an important section because the nape area is going to be an area where we're going to be working with graduation, the same as we've done through both of the side panels. Rather than taking a diagonal back section, we're now taking vertical sections to build up our weight. Now the weight build up through that nape area, the weight's going to rest on the occipital bone. That's where we want the structure and the length of the graduation to be. So it's really important that we section the hair off where we want that heavy weight line to be, and we're wanting to have it round about the occipital bone. When I'm cutting the graduation on the nape section, I'm making sure that I'm pulling the hair straight off the head to the centre of my body and angling my fingers appropriately to cut in the graduation that we need. We're not over directing, we're not elevating, and I'm not following the head shape at this point. We're now moving into the crown area of the head, and I've changed from taking vertical sections to taking horizontal sections. I've also changed my tool. I'm not using scissors, I'm using the razor. By taking horizontal sections, I can now over direct the hair in the crown area down towards the occipital bone, leaving length and the build up of length in the crown area. And also, using the razor, it allows me to add texture and softness and movement into the longer lengths of this haircut. Combing each section after it's been cut to make sure I've got the appropriate movement, the appropriate softness, the appropriate texture. And when we're working with the razor, we're using the point of the razor, we're using the heel of the razor, and we're using the flat of the razor blade to do loads and loads of different things. I would use the point of the razor to remove bulk, remove weight and give me separation. I would use closer to the heel of the razor to put in structure and to remove length, and then we would use the flat blade of the razor to reduce a little bit more surface weight, a little bit more surface texture. As I'm working up the head with each new section, I'm not following the head shape, I'm over directing the hair down, and you can see that really clearly here. Over directing the hair down towards the occipital bone, and that allows me to keep length up top. At this point of the haircut, you can see we've completed the back section of the head, and all I'm doing now is I'm just combing the hair about, seeing how it moves, seeing how the hair's reacting to what we've done, and I'm assessing the haircut. I'm assessing the movement, the texture and the shape. Am I happy with it? Do I need to go back in and do something else? This is the point where you kind of get your hands on about the haircut and really use your eyes to tell the story. Use your eyes to assess and decide what your next move is. Now for the top. The top's going to have all the length, texture and movement. That's why we're using the razor. You can just see the amount of length that's in the fringe area of the haircut. Now, my client Lewis likes to have a little bit of length at the front, purely because it gives us versatility, it gives us more options. So the next stage of this haircut is sectioning off the fringe part of the haircut. Now, again, we're sectioning off the fringe part of the haircut because I don't really want to think about the fringe at the minute. That's a separate part of my haircut. What I want to do is I want to separate off the fringe, and then I want to kind of let everything else that's on top fall down across to both of the sides and down across the back. That way we can now start to connect the top part of the haircut in with my sides and the back. Using the recession area of the head as a guideline to be able to section the fringe off. Taking a diagonal section back from the recession point all the way to the opposite corner of the head. Doing that on both sides, we create a triangle. Now this triangle is our fringe section. On the top, we're taking horizontal sections and we're over directing each of these sections down to the parietal ridge. That's where you'll find your guideline, because that is where we want to create the length. That's where we want to create weight. We'll do the same on the back, but rather than finding it in the parietal ridge, we're going to find it in the occipital bone. That's where we want the weight to be. And then we move on to the opposite side Again, utilising horizontal sections and utilising over direction, we over direct down onto our parietal ridge to keep the length up on top of our haircut. And again, because of that white backdrop, you can really see the top of the haircut, or each top section, getting over directed down onto the parietal ridge. There's a really good visual there. That just allows us to keep more length on the top, like I say. So using a thinning scissor now. Now the reason I've used my thinning scissor at this point is because I don't want to go in with the normal scissor when the hair's wet. I'm just going to take off far too much hair if I use the normal scissors. So I've changed tool to the thinning scissors, and that's going to allow me to go in with the point of the thinning scissor to remove more weight in deeper areas of the top section. Of course we want to keep it as top heavy as possible, that's the whole point of the graduation, but I want, like I say, the hair to move. I want to add texture to the hair. This haircut by no stretch of the imagination is going to sit smooth and slick. This haircut is going to be hair that's going to move, and for that and that reason alone, I'm going in here with my thinning scissor to introduce much more deeper texture, to allow the hair to move, to allow the hair to be as textured as possible. Now the fringe part of the haircut has to be disconnected. There's no way we can connect the fringe in with the rest of the haircut and expect it to be long. It needs to have disconnection in it. Now, as we've moved the hair about, the fringe is sitting and functioning really nicely with the rest of the graduation. So what we're going to do is, we're going to connect the fringe in by starting at the back, just behind the ear, and then we're going to use the razor to slide forward and get longer as we get closer to the front of the head, allowing us to keep and maintain as much length and softness through the front of the haircut as possible. So when you're working with the fringe part of the haircut, we are using our guideline on the parietal ridge to blend it in with the rest of the haircut, with the rest of the graduation. We're moving from the back towards the front, but the closer to the front we get, we start to reduce the amount of graduation that we're putting through it, and we start to kind of pull the hair straight down towards the face, keeping it as close to the face as possible. And at that point, we're only working on the perimeter length, the outside length that you're seeing. We're not putting any graduation in at this point of the haircut. Once we've done that, get the hands in the hair, move the hair about, comb the hair about, see how everything's reacting to what we've done with the haircut, and once we're happy, we just go ahead and we get the styling of the haircut done. So the style dry, I'm utilising a lot of wrap drying. Now, what is wrap drying? Wrap drying is basically when we use usually a flat brush, whether it be a vent brush or a paddle brush or a denim brush, and we're using the surface of the head to wrap the hair round about. Now, the hair's quite short, so it's not going to wrap round the whole head, but because you're using the surface of the head, it's keeping the hair flat. We're not introducing volume, we're not introducing too much bend in the hair. We're just trying to keep the hair as naturally flat as possible, so when it's dry, I can go in with my fingers or go in with a cream or go in with a product to really manipulate the texture of the haircut that we've worked in with our razor. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to work the taper in. Now we want to make sure we've established our longest length. That is the length running through the parietal ridge onto the top of the head, which we've done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put in our shortest length, which we're going to put in with our trimmer. So before we start doing the taper, I'm just going to make sure the fringe section is clipped up and out the way, just so I can really focus on the taper and not have to worry about any kind of hair from top or from the front falling into my sections that I'm going to be cutting with my clipper. So here I'm putting my zero guideline in using the trimmer, and I'm just working that diagonal section just in front of the ear. Remember, this is a taper, it's not a fade. A fade would go above the ear and down the back, whereas a taper always sits on the side just in front of the ear, and that's the area that we're going to fade out. Once we've got that zero guideline in place and we're happy with where it should be, we then go in with the guards to start to blend in the shortest to the longest. So the next clipper guard I'm going to use is going to be a one guard, and I'm just going to go in with that closed, and then I'm going to establish that one zone with my clipper. And as I'm going in with the clipper, I really need to make sure that I go in with the clipper blade flat to the head. That's going to take off the maximum amount of hair. And as I start to work up into my graduation, I need to then pull the clipper off the head. Now the best way to describe this would be like going in a C-shaped motion, and what that's doing is that's working with our graduation, and as we make that C-shaped motion with the clipper from a flat blade, it then graduates off the head and we start to connect our shortest lengths with the longer lengths. I've just went in there with my half guard, so I've went from my one to my half, and my half is making that zero line just that little bit softer, working with the C-shaped motion. And then once I've done that, I take the half guard off and I'm just working with a zero on the clipper, and eventually we'll soften that zero line out and we'll get a really nice soft taper. And to connect the rest of the taper in, we're going to go in with some scissors or comb, and that's going to allow us to create a really nice soft blend from our zero line all the way up into the longer lengths at the parietal ridge, making sure that the scissors are moving twice the speed of the comb. And also using scissors or comb, you can use the point of the scissors as well to introduce more texture, to introduce more movement to the haircut. Release that top section and see how it blends in with the rest of the work. Making sure it's sitting, make sure it sits well, make sure it's how you want it to sit. So moving on to the opposite side, I've already sectioned off my fringe and I'm going in with my trimmer to put in that 0 line. Once I'm happy with my 0 line, I'm going to then change to the bigger clipper and I'm putting on the 1 guard, and I'm going to create that 1 zone using my 1 guard. Utilising that C-shaped motion, making sure the clipper is flat to the head, and the closer you get to the parietal ridge or the more you work up towards the top of the head, we need to flick off, we need to utilise that C-shaped motion, which helps us graduate into the longer lengths. Once I'm happy with that, I change my clipper guard to the half guard to again work within that 1 zone. I don't go beyond that 1 zone, I go from my shortest point, which is a 0, into the 1 zone with a half guard, and when I'm in that 1 zone, I start to work my C-shaped motion and graduate off the head, so I'm gradually getting longer into the higher parts of the head. And when I'm happy with the graduation that I've created with my half guard, I then move down to my 0 with the bigger clipper and eventually take out that 0 line that we've created as our shortest length. Once I'm happy with the taper, going back in with the scissors or comb technique to blend into the longer lengths of the graduation that we've already cut. Making sure we're utilising the comb and coming off the head when appropriate, so we don't take too much hair off the longer lengths on top. And when we're happy with that, we can then move on to the back. So we're now in the back of the head, and again we're repeating the exact same process. We're making sure that we're putting in our shortest length so we can connect our shortest length into our longest length, and that's all we're really doing here when we're working with the clipper or when we're working with this type of graduation, this shot, because you need to remember that when we're working with the clipper and we're taking the hair as short as we are just now, we're still working with graduation. We're still going from a short length into our long length. Now, like I said, we've already established our longer length. That's the parietal ridge. That is the area around about the crown area, moving on to the top of the head. Here what we're doing is we're establishing our shortest length. It's the exact same as we've done on both sides. And then once we've established our shortest length, we just need to connect both of them together. And we do that by working through our guards. And what that does is it allows us to keep lengths slightly longer as we work up the head, and then the more we work down the head, we start to work closer to the shorter lengths using the smaller numbered guards. Here is a really good visual of that C-shaped motion that we're using with the clipper, and you can see how it really creates a nice graduation into the longer lengths you can see that build up of weight. Here you can see me using the 1.5 guard, and what I'm using the 1.5 guard for is to graduate into my longer lengths. It's that simple. The longer the length gets, the higher the guard number needs to be, and what I'm really doing here is I'm just making sure I'm getting a nice blend from my shortest length into my longest length. It's as simple as that. Once I have faded out my zero line, I'm just going to go in with my foils just to give me a cleaner fade, just to give me that cleaner taper on the neckline. That's all we're really doing here. We're just tying up any wee loose hairs, and that just makes that fade look a little bit more seamless, makes that taper and that graduation look a little bit more, as I say, seamless. And to finish off that taper at the back, going in again with scissor over comb. Now, because we've got so much bulk at the back, because we've got so much hair working through the back, I'm going to chop and change. I'm going to be using different sets of scissors. I'm going to be using my normal scissor to work with my scissor over comb, but then I'm going to go in with my thinning scissor to work more softness into it. This whole haircut that we've worked today has basically been all about texture and softness. So I've been using the razor and we've been using points of the scissors and so on. So if I just go in here and just finish off by club cutting everything, it kind of takes that texture out. So I'm going to go back in with the thinning scissor to go in slightly deeper to not remove weight, but to add texture. A lot of people see people using thinning scissors and they think, oh, he's just taking that out, taking to remove any weight lines. That's not what we're doing here. What I'm using the thinning scissor for, when you see it happening, is to create the texture, to create more movement. That's the reason I'm utilising that tool. It's going to allow me to go deeper into the hair on the shorter lengths at the back, and it's going to allow me to kind of create deeper textures. And there you see me going in with the thinning scissor, and you can see how I'm using it totally differently from the normal scissor. I'm going right underneath, I'm going really close to the roots, I'm taking that scissor a lot deeper into the hair, which allows me to create that texture, to create the movement that we need. It also creates the softness that we're looking for as well. So we're using this as a texturizing tool. I'm assessing my haircut at this point. Again, am I happy with it? And I've been asking myself the same question throughout the whole process, but I'm really evaluating the haircut and I'm checking it out to see if I'm happy with it. I'm moving it about, I'm seeing how much playability the hair's got. I'm also looking at the movement and the weight. Do I want to take anything else out? And I've looked through the top and I just feel as if the top could have a little bit more playability. It needs that little bit more texture. So I'm just going to work through that whole top panel. Again, I'm going to go in with the point of the scissor, going really quite deep here. I want to go in quite deep, kind of close to kind of halfway down the length of that whole top section, and just softening that weight, taking the weight out, giving us more texture. Now you can see the haircut's got loads and loads of texture in it already, but I feel as if it could be doing with just that little bit more. I think it just needs more movement. All I'm doing here is I'm personalising my haircut. I'm seeing what I want it to do, and if it's not responding, I'm going back in and I'm going to change it. If it doesn't do what I want it to do, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to implement different techniques that need to be used to allow the hair to do what I want it to be doing. And if it's not, as I say, if it's not doing that, I'm going back in and I'm cutting it out. I'm using the point of the scissor here to give us the texture that we're looking for. It's also creating that little bit more lightness on top. So it's a top heavy haircut. I mean, it's a very top heavy haircut, but I don't want it to look like a mushroom. It needs to work for my client. So yeah, we want it top heavy, but we want the movement, and we want the appropriate movement. In a nutshell, what we've created is a strong graduated shape through the sides and through the back, and we've worked with a top heavy length on top with loads of texture and loads of movement. This movement and this length up top is going to give my client Lewis loads of versatility in his haircut, and that's what I'm looking for. I want my client to walk out the door happy with plenty of options, what they can do with their hair. I don't want to just give one client one image and that's it. I want to give them versatility and I want to give them options, and that's what we're passionate about here at Splat Bee Barbering, is to give clients the inspiration to go and style their hair and have fun with their hair, because at the end of the day it should be fun, it should be inspiring. So I hope you've learned a lot on this journey with this graduated taper that we've worked with, and I'm Barry Doolan, and this is Splat Bee Barbering, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, and God bless.